On the 19th of April 2016, one day after the independence of Zimbabwe, I did something that I never ever thought I would have the guts to do. I recorded a video. Now I know you're thinking that's nothing to write home about, but it changed my life. And it began to change my nation, Zimbabwe. The 4-minute video that I recorded was a personal rant at the state in which my nation, Zimbabwe, finds itself in 37 years after independence. On the day that I recorded this video, I was struggling. I was dejected. I was failing to pay school fees for my little children. I was failing to put food on the table. At the heart of this video was a cry for the future of my nation. It was a call to action to every Zimbabwean to stand up and speak up against corruption, injustice, and poverty. Zimbabweans from everywhere responded in ways that not even I could ever have predicted. I was 3 years old when Zimbabwe gained independence from British colonial rule in April of 1980. My parents, who had gone to the war to help liberate our country, couldn't have guessed that 37 years later, their 40-year-old son would be involved in trying to pry our nation free from the clutches of an oppressor whom they had trusted as a liberator. Our citizens have been cowed through intimidation and all sorts of machinations into submission and into silence. The liberty that they fought for and that they voted for has today become nothing but a line in a speech and a lie to those that gave their lives for our freedom. Now, I made a decision 15 years ago that I would give a huge portion of my life to helping people. So I became a pastor. I wanted to teach people that hope and perseverance are the only things that you have left in life when you have lost everything. As I taught this, I encountered the young people of Zimbabwe. They are audacious, amazing dreamers. And tragically, they've lost all their dreams to politicians who are selfish, uncaring, and evil. Last year, I realized that we are the people that we have been waiting for. I realized that nobody can bring a fight to Zimbabwe and for Zimbabwe than Zimbabweans themselves. And we needed to show up without fear and without retreat. So I decided to record that first video. And that video turned into 25 other videos. I recorded one every day. And my goal was simple. I wanted to teach Zimbabweans how to stand up, how to be citizens again, how to speak up, and how to hold their government to account, because we, the people, are the ones that have the mandate and the power to hold them to account. And so from the grassroots, a movement was formed. Let me share with you just a snippet of that very first video that I entitled #ThisFlag. This flag, it is my country, my Zimbabwe. We go through so much. We don't look like much even now, but there is promise in it. I will fight for it, I will live for it, and I will stand for it. This is the time that a change must happen. Quit standing on the sidelines and watching this flag fly and wishing for a future that you are not at all wanting to get involved in. This flag, every day that it flies, is begging for you to get involved, is begging for you to say something, is begging for you to cry out and to say, why must we be in the situation that we are in? This flag, it's your flag, it's my flag. This flag. Thank you. #ThisFlag became and still is a rallying call to restore Zimbabwe to being a country that we can be proud of. Our movement is dedicated to mobilizing citizens to speak, to ask, and to act in the interests of a better Zimbabwe. Our goal is to awaken responsible citizenry that shuns violence as a means of conflict resolution and instead allows the interrogation of ideas and, more importantly, the respect for every citizen of our nation. Our movement took on many campaigns. We mobilized people against the currency that our government is today using to steal money from poor citizens of Zimbabwe. In 2008, we had inflation that ran into thousands of percentages and presented us with a $100 trillion note. We cannot simply allow that to happen again. We successfully rallied the entire nation to boycott work and school on the 6th of July, 2016. And that protest was against the continued mismanagement and injustice of our nation, Zimbabwe. Since my first video that you just watched, many of my fellow and good citizens have been abused, jailed, abducted, beaten, and threatened with death. I was first arrested 6 days after the success of the protest, the boycott protest that we inspired. And I was charged with attempting to subvert a constitutionally elected government, a charge that carries a 20-year prison sentence without the option for a fine if I'm found to be convicted. Who would have thought, imagine this, a video that I made out of pure love for my country, today has me charged with trying to overthrow the government. But something amazing happened during that arrest. As I was being taken to court, thousands of Zimbabweans rallied each other and came to the courts to stand and demand for my release. They stood their ground. They knelt in prayer before a fiercely armed riot police. It grew dark and they refused to go home. They went and bought food and shared with each other. They bought candles and lit them as a sign of this new flame of undying hope. At the end of the day, people power prevailed. I was finally released after more than 10 hours of court deliberations. That event gave birth to a new Zimbabwe in the hearts of Zimbabweans. That one can never be taken away. I escaped Zimbabwe soon after my release because my wife and my children, they had been threatened whilst I was in prison. They attempted to rape my wife, who was 7 months pregnant, and tried to pick up my 2 children from school. I had to get them to safety, and I thank God that I managed to do it. As I was on the run, President Robert Mugabe publicly issued threats at a gathering against me, and he said people like me had no place in Zimbabwe, and that I would be jailed if I continued to meddle in the politics of our nation, and that is a threat that he would soon fulfill. But despite the threats, I decided to return home. I left my family in safety, and on the 1st of February 2017, I landed back at Harare International Airport. I was promptly detained by intelligence operatives and interrogated for hours. They wanted to know where I had been, who I had met, and why I had come back. But this is home, for goodness sake. What do you mean, why have I come back? I had come to the critical realization in my thought process of returning to Zimbabwe that my generation can no longer continue to be absent from charting our own future. After that detention, I was thrown into Chikurubi maximum security prison, where for 12 days I was denied my freedom. Many things happened there. Suffice to say, when I came out, I was more determined to stand for my nation than when I had gotten inside. Today, I am out on bail. I have appeared in court on 4 different occasions, and I have a 5th appearance that is scheduled for the 15th of June 2017. The state continues to say that they are not ready to prosecute, and so continue to push my case forward. I have to report to the police regularly. I'm followed by security agents almost daily. My passport has been seized, and I only have access to it when I apply to the High Court, stating exactly where I am going. I want to take this moment to thank my parents, Baba and my Mawarire, because they allowed me to use the title deeds to the only home that my family has as surety for my return to Zimbabwe after I'm done here. Despite all of this, there is one thing that cannot be denied. Zimbabwe is entering a season of change. And on behalf of my generation in Zimbabwe, we declare to our oppressors that you cannot stop your sun from setting, and you most certainly cannot stop ours from rising. End-of-life care. It's a term I learned from a doctor that I met 2 days ago right here at the Oslo Freedom Forum, Dr. Christoph Kind. And he told me that you care for patients even who are terminally ill, not because you can do anything for them, but because they deserve care, because that's what you do as a human. We care about Zimbabwe not because we can change it tomorrow, but because that's what Zimbabweans do. They care for their nation because something could happen that not even we expected, but we must remain caring. As I close today, let me declare to you the kind of Zimbabwe that we want. We're tired of defining our nation by the past oppressor, and we must now define it by the dream that we carry in our hearts. The kind of Zimbabwe that we want must respect democratic governance, the rule of law, and mostly our constitution. It must respect the sacred ideals of the liberation struggle that so many of my mothers and fathers and grandmothers and fathers gave their lives for. Our nation must work zealously to protect our women, our children, our senior citizens, and our disabled. Zimbabwe has to promote the youth and set them up to be successors of a better nation. And above all, every one of us Zimbabweans must put the interests of the country before those of self or political affiliation. We now commit ourselves to the work of uniting Zimbabweans everywhere, to stand together, to speak together, and to act together. We realize today more than ever that if we cannot cause the politician to change, then we must inspire the citizen to be bold. Oslo Freedom Forum, you have been amazing. Mwariva kuitire zvakanaka. God bless you. Nyabonga kakulu. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.